Hey everybody, thanks for being here today. So 1 year ago today, exactly on June 16th last year, I went out for a long bike ride, and when I got home, when I got back to the house, I got some really bad news. I mean, it was really bad news. I'll tell the adults about it, it doesn't matter to you. But the interesting thing about this is I've learned over the years that when bad things happen, maybe the best thing to do for me is to picture Jesus sitting right next to me and offering me a little comfort, saying, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that thing happened. And that's exactly what happened that day. I learned about this bad news about 4:30 in the afternoon, and that evening I celebrated a mass at my church because it was their feast day. And so about 60, 70 people came to the church that evening, and we celebrated a mass together. And that was just so really nice. These people came and we prayed together and we worshiped God. And even though the situation didn't change, but I just kind of felt a little better about it. It was still sad, but God was kind of with me. And that was a really neat thing. And so that's what I wanted to remind you of, that I know not everything in life always goes well the way you want it to. Fortunately, sometimes it does. But when things don't go right, maybe that's what you can do. Maybe you can close your eyes and maybe you can sit and you can picture Jesus sitting right next to you with his arm around you and going like, I'm really sorry that happened, all right? Because God loves you and God cares about what happens to us, especially when things don't go too well. And when you get a chance, of course, in those moments, and you can come and you can worship with other people, that's a great way too to draw close to God, okay? Kind of a simple point, but it's awfully important, all right? Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. By the way, coffee yes, there's donuts after Mass. Don't forget to take your dads. Jesus makes a wonderful point in the gospel reading about seed. This idea that a seed, a tiny seed, like a mustard seed, will grow up to a big bush or even a big tree. This idea that something small can become something big. And you would know lots of examples of this. This church is an example. In 1956, this church started with just a handful of families. And look what we are now, small to big. You could look at the universal church that starts with Jesus and 12 disciples. And what is it now? A couple billion Christian people on the planet. Or if you wanted to, you could even do the whole of salvation history. Because where does it start? With Abraham, one guy. Just one guy who did what God asked him to do. And that has led us to where we are. So this idea of small to big certainly makes a lot of sense. Even makes sense in our own individual lives. I would think that, I don't know, maybe it'd be hard for some of us, but maybe you're one of those people that you could, if you will, pick out the moment or the person that planted the seed of faith in you. And then maybe you would remember all the people along the way that watered it, if you will, and helped your faith grow. And so you are to where you are now. And I don't know, of course, we're all on a journey. None of us ever quits growing, we hope. And so maybe you're not a big tree right now, but maybe you're on the way to that. It's just such a wonderful thing to think of, and it's a wonderful encouragement. But there's also, if you will, I guess, a negative side to it. A seed doesn't do anything unless it's planted. You have to plant a seed in order for it to grow. If you don't plant it, you still have a seed. Which brings me to the story I was telling the children. And so, it was June 16th. I remember this very well, about 4:30 in the afternoon. I got home from my a long bike ride, and I found out that Gino Mater had died. Now, I know that name doesn't mean anything to any of you. Gino was a professional bicycle racer in Europe. He was 26 at the time. The day before, he had crashed on a descent down a mountain in Switzerland. And the paramedics had gotten to him pretty quick and revived him, but he had died earlier that morning of the 16th. I can't tell you why it is the death of this young man, who I had never met, only knew by his sporting accomplishments. I can't tell you why it affected me so much, but it did. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew something about him, but over the next couple hours and even into the next day, I did some searching to try to find out more about Gino. And everything I found just pointed to the fact that he was just a terrific guy. I knew he had won the Best Young Rider competition in the Vuelta a España, that is the Tour of Spain bicycle race, a 21-day race all around Spain. He was the best young rider one year. And something I didn't know was the sports writer that was writing about this talked about the wonderful way by which he handled that success and when he was awarded the trophy at the end of the race. He had raised some money as part of for a charity in Africa as part of that success. Guy wasn't perfect. One of the sports writers said that Gino had trouble on and off the bike. I don't know what that meant particularly, but they're probably just like every one of us. You have a little success, maybe you struggle with it, maybe you're not living up to someone's expectations and you struggle with that. But I think as I looked more and more at these articles, the thing that struck me was what was not there. No one said anything about Gino's faith. There was no mention of a funeral, no mention of church, nothing of that. And there was a part of me that thought, well, maybe that's because basically I'm reading articles that have been written by sports writers, and maybe they just don't bring that stuff up. But I looked hard and never found any reference to Gino and his faith. And so I think what really got me about Gino's death is I realized here was a 26-year-old man in whom no one had planted a seed, and that he had died without faith. That even if they were going to have a funeral for him, no one was going to be able to do what we do at funerals. We sprinkle the urn or the casket and we say, in the waters of baptism, this person has died with Christ and will rise with him to new life. No one would be able to say that about Gino. If you come into the office and you look at my computer and it's on the screensaver thing, or the backgrounds change, you'll see a picture of Gino. And the reason that picture is there, a picture of this guy, and it's just this great smile, the reason that's there is to remind me that there are Ginos in our community, 26-year-old people who do not have any faith, because no one has planted a seed of faith in them. And so they have nothing. And they are, just as Gino was, they are vulnerable to tragedy. It is entirely possible that they might go out for a wonderful evening, some evening, and something tragic might happen to them, and that they would die without having a seed of faith. I don't know if you've noticed, I think I have. I don't track it. I don't track my homilies, but I believe over the last year there have been increasingly more references to evangelization. And I think it has to go back. I think it goes back to Gino, because it just hurts to think that there's a chance that this parish, you and I individually, might have passed by an opportunity for some reason to plant a seed and then because we didn't do that, that seed was never nurtured, never grew, and that there would be someone that would die in that situation. It's such a difficult question. What do we do in our own lives? Because we tend to think, as I pointed out before, that evangelization, well, I need a soapbox, and I'm supposed to stand on the soapbox and yell and scream, or I'm supposed to be pushy, or I'm supposed to be whatever. And I don't think any of that's true. I think it is a question of you and I in our own circumstances, maybe unique circumstances. We need to figure out what it is we can do to plant seeds of faith and to nurture them. Because you consider what that might do as you plant that seed. As the first part of the gospel reading says, you might never know what happened. You might not know that something you said, and maybe even in an offhanded way, you were willing to talk about your faith. You mentioned that you went to church and it made such a difference in your life. Something like that. You made a comment in a break room at the office, and that, without your knowing it, got someone at a moment later down their life to say, maybe I should go to church too. And you would have, without knowing it, planted faith in them that then somebody else nurtured. We just need to do our best. We need to actually work at this, really pray about this, asking the Lord, what can I do so that there are no more Gino Maders in the world?